Two promoted teams and Keir Starmer are slipping down, yet Huddersfield fans all have a big frown. They are the ones in the wooden spoon spot. Saints are now at top of the lot. Leigh are getting their act and gear for all the goss. Leigh and John are here. Welcome to the 22nd episode of Super League 360. A podcast primarily about the top tier of British Rugby League. My name is Leigh. Can't get my words right. Addison.
It's a Prime podcast, and I'm John Davidson.
Yeah. If it was on Amazon Prime, it's on Amazon, I think, so it could be. Yeah, I mentioned Keir Starmer then. Looks like you're going to get your 7th Prime Minister in 10 years or something, John. So I don't know if you're putting your hat in the ring.
I'm not putting my hat in the ring. It's kind of similar to, as you would know, what's happened in Australia a while back when there was... Rudd and then Gillard and then Rudd again and then Abbott and then what was it, Turnbull and then Morrison and then yeah.
I say exactly what to say when it comes to rugby league coaches and football coaches and sports coaches in general. When you have to change boss so much, it says a lot more about the recruiters rather than the recruited. I'm a coach in Australia. John is a journalist in the UK. Please read the description or listen to all pods to make our introduction shorter. This podcast is also being aired on the Ashes Rugby League Coach podcast platforms, as well as the Rugby League Coach YouTube too. And if you subscribe to those, you won't miss a thing. Also, thanks to rugbyleague.com. I do want to say before I start, those who listen to the Rugby League Coach podcast just had a week off from doing that just to give myself a few hours. John, let's go through the table. What am I going to see when I look at this Super League table, John?
You're going to see... Well, I haven't checked it lately, but you're going to see Wigan, obviously, on the march, on the rise. Big win over Leeds. Hull KR squeaked past Leigh, so they're definitely moving up. Another win for the Wire. Another loss for Toulouse. A big win important win for Cass as well.
So Hull KR and and Warrington are the two teams that have played one less game, so I'll get that straight before we start.
Mm-hmm.
St Helens are top of the ladder. Everyone else has played 11 games. Saints are top with 18. Leeds and Warrington are in second and third, respectively, on 16. Hull KR in fourth with 14. Two other teams are on 14. That's Wakefield in fifth and Wigan in sixth. Two teams on 10. Leigh in 7th and Catalans in 8th. Hull FC, Bradford Bulls, Castleford Tigers are the three teams in 9th, 10th and 11th, respectively, on 8 points. And York and Toulouse are in 12th and 13th on 6 points, respectively. Holding up everybody else at the bottom of the ladder on 4 points is the unleashed Huddersfield Giants. Before we go any further, a couple of weeks ago, we read out a tweet from someone that accused Neil Holding, who played 360 games, mostly for Saints, but also Rochdale, Oldham and Bradford, played for Great Britain on 4 occasions too in the early 80s. He was a great little half. Somebody sent in a tweet. It was part of our questions. We asked for questions, and this was the third thing that was on there. Just to put it in some kind of context, we literally just read it out. I laughed because it was preposterous, basically. He didn't like the fact that tweet was written, John, and he gave me a call. We had a very fair conversation, so it's an apology from me for reading it out. Quite frankly, I just read it out and didn't have time to filter it. And, so my apologies to Neil Holding.
Yeah, and I made a tongue-in-cheek comment about Tommy Robinson, but... anyone who wants to know about Tommy Robinson, obviously he's a criminal, and you can find out about all his convictions. It's not actually his real name, but you can go online and find those out. And I guess we'll move on.
Rugby League tweet of the week, Steve Mascord said, "People have shorter attention spans. I get it. Will Origin be like this?" Now, I know this is Super League 360, but we do mention the NRL. John, I was at Magic Round at the weekend. I was bored out of my brains. I went on Friday.
You hadn't drunk enough, had you?
True. If I want to watch touch football, so touch rugby, I'll watch touch rugby. It's awful. I don't like it. There's no jeopardy between attack and defence. The game looks like a game of rugby league for 10 minutes and then it totally opens up. What I did notice is I've not been to Magic Round for 5 years. I think it will at least be another 5 years based on this before I go again. Only went because I didn't have to pay for the ticket. And the crowd is a lot younger, so they're obviously doing something right. And people have automatically linked the faster ruck speeds as the reason people are happier with rugby league in Australia, and that's something else that's happened in Britain, and this is why it's an important conversation. But it's a bit more complicated than that. John, yes, mention the NRL, but also link it back to Super League. This faster ruck that we are seeing in rugby league at the minute, what impact is it having?
Geez, Leigh, that's that's a difficult one to answer. How long have we got? Look, to tie it back to what you originally said, yeah, I mean, I think it's common knowledge that people these days, particularly younger people, have shorter attention spans, and that's down to technology and social media and dual screening and sometimes three screening. I don't think necessarily rugby league's popularity in Australia is down to the faster rucks or the rules changes. I think that's down to the thought that the ball in play more often means more entertainment, which equals more eyeballs. There may be some validity to that, but there's definitely, I don't know, maybe you could call it a culture war, between the traditionalists like yourself and some other people in the sport. And then there's obviously a lot of people who feel the same way as you do. I do get it. And I don't want to see touch footy either. Between the way the game's always been played to what we have at the moment, but the impact, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of injuries, a lot of lopsided scorelines. I don't think it certainly had an impact in Super League. I don't think the impact has been as great as it has been in the NRL, because I was at Wakefield on Friday night, and while you could say, oh well, there was 48 unanswered points, and Wakefield just went through Catlands, but a lot of that was down to just how bad Catlands were as well. They effectively gave up. So, yeah, I don't, to answer your question a long way, I don't think Origin will probably be like that. I think they will, like they always ref Origin, they let a bit more physicality go, they let a few more high shots go, and it is kind of an old-fashioned, usually more of an arm wrestle. That's probably my prediction.
But also, John, I mean, if the referees have to do that, I mean, one pattern I'm seeing over the last few weeks is if scores blow out on a Thursday and a Friday, on Saturday all of a sudden the games are a bit closer.
Mm.
And I can't help but think that the referees are giving less sixer games. They're allowing more latitude at the ruck. The games were definitely slower on Saturday. The field was boggier because it's been raining a lot here in Brisbane.
Yeah.
So they're obviously playing around with the game. They've played around with the game in England to the point where last year it was WrestleMania. This year it's now touch football. And no wonder people get confused. And this fake engineering of the product that we're trying to do. How about we just reward the tackle again? I mean, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool rugby league person. I can tell you that these opinions, positive or negative about rugby league, they're actually not related to age. They are related to people's taste of sport. And I think I would... there's so many people in their early 20s that I've heard say they don't like the game at the moment. And using an analogy, I would say this is like two boxers being in a ring. One of them has to wear heavy gloves. The other one can go bare knuckle. That's the sort of analogy I would come up with, because the balance between attack and defense has gone has gone completely skew with the other way now. Now, you did say earlier that Catalans are poor, etc., etc. It's all part of the same recipe, right? So if your pre-season, if your recruitment for years, quite frankly, has been geared towards a certain type of game, and then all of a sudden the game changes at the drop of a hat, if you're a club that has a coach, for example, that has never coached before, which the Catalans had, even if the coach has coached for 20 years, doesn't mean they're alive to changes very quickly. It could creep up on them before they have chance to change. So there's so many things that's impacting the game all around the world, and the big indicator in England is the injuries, because there's a shorter pre-season than there is in the NRL. In the NRL, I think it's a fine line. In the NRL, I think it's too long and arduous. In Super League, it's not long enough. And
you mean the other way around?
No.
No, you said in the NRL the season's
pre-season.
Oh, pre-season. Sorry, I thought you were saying season. Yeah. My mistake. Yeah,
listening skills, John. The pre-season in the NRL is long and arduous. Too arduous, I believe. Too long. The pre-season in Super League is the opposite, and you're seeing the athletic response. Quite frankly, Leigh's laugh this week. You know, the Super League website is not secure. So when I try and get on it on my laptop, I have to go through the security thing on my laptop because it says this could be imitating another website.
I do remember I did a story in December. It was around Christmas or New Year's, and I think that the Super League website had either been hacked or was down for a couple of days at that point. So
I'll tell you why. It's not secure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a web hosting, guru or anything, but yeah, I would imagine that it's probably something done on the cheap.
John, I'm a one-man business band, and my 3 websites that I own are all secure. That's all I'll say.
The Salford Steve Jobs.
Johnny's tweet of the week. How many times do we need to check the same thing over and over? Madness. Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, that was from the Huddersfield St Helens game. Now, I don't generally like to be critical of referees or video referees or officials because we all make mistakes and, no one is perfect. But some of the video refereeing this season in Super League has been diabolical. And the display on Thursday night, I mean, it was a shite, is that a fair word? I mean, it was a pretty shite game anyway. I mean, Huddersfield were absolutely dreadful. Lola here, 2 dropouts he put straight out. They were just really, really bad. I mean, Huddersfield, they are a championship team in disguise. They should be playing in the championship. Put that aside, and Huddersfield came back into the second half and had a real dig. But the video referee, there was one try, I can't remember who scored it, but it was effectively came off the head of the St Helens player from a kick, and Huddersfield scored. You could see it the first replay, but he went back and checked everything about 3 times, and it took about 3 minutes. You just like, what are you doing? Like, there's got to be a timer, or at least there's got to be someone. And I just to be clear, the bunker system in the NRL is very different to Super League. They have more cameras, they have more money, they have better facilities in the NRL, but Super League, there's got to be an impetus to say, okay, we need a decision quickly here. And if you can't make a decision, then go back to the ref's call, because same with the Captain's Challenge, it is taking an age. And there are things that the viewer at home can spot quickly and go, okay, yeah, that's a try, that's not a try. And officials seem scared to make a decision. And it is weird because there's hardly any media in the UK, in British Rugby League, and the criticism is really social media and fans. But even then, it's not, it's not Liverpool or Arsenal, is it? So yeah, they just seem scared to make a decision, and it's really tough to watch.
I have the misfortune of studying both the bunker and in the NRL and the Super League version of it, and you are right, it's far too long. Sam Burgess made a comment, and we reiterated it last week. Games of rugby league ending sometimes 30 minutes later than they should. And that impacts people's days, particularly if it's a night fixture. I mean, can you imagine some of the times people are getting home? 20 minutes can make a hell of a difference at night time, particularly if you've got to go over the Pennines. And I just think Rugby League needs to get a grip of it, and they need to put some kind of time limit on it. Yes, they don't have the camera angles, but they're never going to have the camera angles until things change. So you've got what you've got. Just make a decision and get on with it. Johnny's Jab this week, you want to talk about the partition fee that Catalans and Toulouse have to pay. And I suppose we will lean on the Catalans' performance and what you wrote this week as well while we're here.
Yeah, I mean, I put out an opinion piece a couple of hours ago that you can read for free online at my Patreon. Basically, it's a long read, a bit of a deep dive on the Catalans, their future, and how they're going this season. And there are a lot of factors in it, but one of the big factors is this near £1 million that they have to pay every year for all the teams from England and the match officials to fly over for their games. Now, this has impacted them heavily. They've cut back on their salary cap spending, and I think they're looking at their coaching situation. They've also cut back on what they're spending on coaches. And according to people that I've spoken to, the way they travel to the UK in terms of when they fly, where they fly from, where they stay in the UK, their travel time, from, if they fly into Manchester and then they have to travel the whole on game day, whatever, all that's been impacted as well because they're looking to do it as cheap as they can. I just think basically it's an absolute joke that they have to pay, even though they should be an equal member of the competition, and the same is for Toulouse. And so it's even harder for Toulouse because they've only got half the central distribution this year. But I just think it's an absolute joke that they're having to do this, and it is competing, with one arm behind their back. And I think we're really seeing, particularly Friday night, we're seeing the results of that. I don't think they're a hell's chance of making the top six this season. They didn't make it last season, and from where they were a couple of years ago, at Old Trafford, at Wembley, it's really disappointing to see.
Why are they being made to pay this money?
But they're being made to pay the money because there is a certain number of English clubs who think, why have we got them in the competition? What do they bring? They've not brought in a TV deal. The French national team is not performing particularly well. You could argue it's gone backwards. And they don't bring any away fans. So it's purely kind of, it's one-way perspective. And they think that the French should be paying their way in the sense that the Sky deal, Sky isn't going to get any more money from people watching the sport in France because it's the different broadcaster. So, why are they should have to pay their way in the competition. But it's just a completely unfair perspective for, it's not equal competition, is it? And I think we're seeing that now because they are really struggling on and off the field. I mean, there was reports in Australia at the start of the year that Catalans Dragons were looking for a buyer in Australia, and I've heard some speculation recently that the owner Bernard Guasch is looking to get out. He's a bit fed up, and he's been there for 20 years. People need to remember it's been like the Warriors in New Zealand. They've been one of the success stories. That club, how it's competed, how it's grown, and we need to help the French. France used to be, what was it, in the 70s or the 50s, or both, they were one of the top nations in rugby league, the big three. And I don't think we can afford to let France wither on the vine. So at this point, with the fact that the English game is running out of money, it's just a case of, all right, we'll they seem to have fat pockets. We'll take some more money out of theirs to distribute amongst ourselves.
It's really sad that some English clubs turn their nose up at the Catalan and Toulouse and anybody that's
and
not
London.
from London. So anybody that's not
yeah.
from the M62 corridor.
Yep. Yeah.
With some smart administration, I'm sure they could make plenty of money from Toulouse and Catalans playing on TV. If the Australian game can make money from Papua New Guinea and from New Zealand Warriors being in the competition, then I'm pretty sure the English game can do the same with some lateral thought. Also, in terms of performance, we can be saying that Catalans are in all sorts right now, but they're still in eighth. I'd just like to remind those small-minded individuals out there that right now, as things stand, the Catalans sit above Hull FC, Bradford Bulls, Castleford Tigers, York Knights, and Huddersfield Giants, who all sit in and around or not a million miles away from the M62 corridor. Indeed, Toulouse are still above Huddersfield Giants, the birthplace of the game. So, and I daren't even go into the next division and have a look at so many of those clubs and that have had the benefit of being on rugby league's birth doorstep and managing to mess up their administration so much that they're struggling to survive in the division below two. So this whole thing knocks me sick, John. Catalans in particular have brought so much to Super League, so much to the Challenge Cup, so much to British Rugby League in general. I do agree with you that a good France would be very good for Rugby League in general too. There's something very attractive about a competition where more than one language is spoken, I think, from so many viewpoints. And if certain people in rugby league can't see that, then I feel sorry for them, quite frankly. And on that note, one of those clubs, Huddersfield, are propping everybody up in the Super League table. Are they a championship club in disguise?
Well, I mean, you watch the game on Thursday, and you'd think that, and you know they're barely getting anyone to their games. The team's struggling beyond belief. In terms of like media profile publicity, it's almost non-existent. They've their new coach, who hasn't arrived yet, but he was an assistant at Titans, but he's a Q Cup coach. I'm not sure if you're aware of him, Leigh.
Andy Jagger, 1977, asked a question to me. He said, "Hope you may be able to give an insight and honest assessment of Jim Lenihan in your next pod. Cheers, all the best." Had a bit of I don't know that much about him, quite frankly, so I did a little bit of research. Basically, he's coached for a long time, right? So he's coached for about 20 years, I think it is, at levels that we can recognise. Burley, I think, is his club, and he took over from Rick Stone in his first incarnation. Rick Stone was successful with them, and then he took over and they weren't successful anymore. So I was having a look at this and thinking, oh, hello. But then he did end up back at Burley some years later and won the Premiership at least once. So, look, there's nothing to suggest that you have a dud, and there's nothing to suggest that you've got the best coach since Jesus was born either. So, look, I can't say to Huddersfield fans, based on what I've heard in my time in Australia, or not heard, and what I've looked at, and what I'm looking at the levels, I can't sit here and say to Huddersfield fans everything's going to be fantastic. But he obviously impressed somebody enough in that organisation to pip some other people. I mean, you broke a story a couple of weeks ago that the Cronulla assistant was in the mix. There could be other factors, John. So I was offered a professional job in England 10 years ago, actually, now. And everything was great until they told me how much was on offer in the contract.
Well, good that you mentioned that. My understanding with Daniel Holdsworth is that he knocked back the job. Now, he was offered it, he knocked it back. I don't know why he knocked it back, sorry. I would presume financial reasons, but he was in the mix for that job. So I don't think Jim Lenihan was the first pick. Make of that what you will. But look, I wish him all the best. I think it's a very difficult job. And it's hard to see with Huddersfield they need, they've got a lot of players off contract. They really need to move a lot of players on, and they need to make, look, we're already in May. There's already players off contract for next season. You need to be getting deals done now. But I think all the other clubs are very active. So, you look at York and Castleford, who are in similar positions, have made some big signings or are about to. So, yeah, they really need to pull their finger out, because I think they are a championship club in waiting, Huddersfield. And maybe going down to the championship could be a good thing for them. They've done it before and come back. I did interview Tony Smith last week. I had a couple of hours chatting with him, and that was fascinating. And he obviously, his first senior gig was at Huddersfield, and he got, well, I don't want to say he got them relegated, but he took them down and then he took them back up. But it was funny that he was telling me a story about he flew over for a job interview and he paid his own way. And he never got that reimbursed by the club, which I thought was funny. But you could say, look, at least he showed how keen he was, because he paid his own airfare over from Sydney, where he was assistant coach at Parramatta, and he had a successful stint at Huddersfield. So we'll see what the future brings for the unleashed Giants.
Where will Brodie Croft play next year?
He's going to Warrington.
Confirmed.
I think it's pretty much done. Yeah, I think it's pretty much done. It's quite interesting because obviously George Williams is leaving. They needed a half replacement. They've got Ewan Irwin there. They've got Leon Hayes. They've got Mark Sneed. But I think they needed a more experienced half, and they have gone for a big name. When I spoke to officials at Warrington a while ago, they denied Brodie Croft, as in they were talking to him at present and played down, looking for a replacement, but they've been very quiet, and I think they've got that done. And it's also interesting because I think there was some St George Illawarra interest, there was interest from Perth, and I think Leeds did want to keep him, but it's another player leaving Leeds. There are so many players leaving Leeds at the end of this year. You really look at the recruitment at Leeds Runers and you think, what the hell are they doing? Harry Newman, James McDonald, Mikolaj Ledsky going to Perth, Croft going to Warrington, Ryan Hall, I think is probably likely to retire. They also need to pull their fingers out, because they're losing, I think, 4 or 5 of their first 13, which, particularly some important positions there.
Ian Bleeds is there, isn't he, as the director of whatever. Yes. And
rugby.
To be fair, at Salford, I think he was an integral part in them getting some cut price players and putting the team together to succeed under a couple of different coaches. So I would assume they have a plan. I don't think this is a ship that's got a lot of holes in and they're struggling to fill the holes.
I think in terms of Salford, I think the likes of Paul Rowley and Paul King and Ian Orton before that had a very big part in those signings as well. And if they do have a plan, you really have to wonder what it is, because they let Jack Sinfield go, who was a halfback, and obviously a son of a club legend, and he's been killing it at Wakefield. Ned McCormick is another one, local junior who's going to Wakefield, and Cameron Smith is going at the end of the year, who's another local junior who obviously the local juniors count less on the cap. So it's obviously a benefit to have those local juniors. So, yeah, it's quite weird when you look at Leeds, a number of their signings that they've made. Matauti is on loan playing at Hull FC. He can't get into the Leeds team. Ethan O'Neill, they signed in the offseason. He can't get in the Leeds team. He was on loan at Hull FC. So we don't know what's happened with Brad Arthur either. He could be gone. So you kind of look at it. I look at it this way for Leeds. I think this year is their year if they're going to win something at Old Trafford, because I think like next year, I wouldn't say they're going to be rebuilding next year, but I don't think they're going to be as strong unless they make some very, very big signings.
York have made some re-signings, and they're also after a player from the NRL.
Yes, I broke the story that they'd re-signed Toa Mataafa, the fullback, who's been very, very good this season. So that's a key retention for them. They've also re-signed David Nofaluma and Cody Hunter. But Nofaluma, obviously, long career at the West Tigers. He was horrendous at Salford and then resurfaced at Halifax, did well, and he seems to have, got his focus back, got his head right, and he's doing really well at York. And the other one, another story that I broke was Cam McInnes. Now, apparently talks with Perth for Cam McInnes have broken down, and I think York are with a very good chance of signing him, and I think that'd be a massive sign. I'm a big fan of Cam McInnes as a player. You just look at his face, and he's someone who bleeds on the pitch, doesn't he? Like he just plays with all the heart and passion, and I think he's the kind of guy you can build a club around. He's a leader. He sets the tone for a squad, and I think he'd be a fantastic marquee for signing for York if they can pull it off for a top professional.
32 years old at present. So
I think I still think if you sign him to 2 years, I think he get good value out of him for 2 years. He's obviously not going to spend 5 years there, but I think in terms of the short term, I think he could be a really good.
I'm glad you've mentioned the short term, because in Masters Rugby League you get different colour shorts depending on your age, and so maybe that needs to be brought in for Super League with all the signings that they're trumpeting. Have London got a new owner on board?
They've diverted. I think some of the ownership. So there's an Andrew Gray who is a Brisbane-based entrepreneur. I'm not really that sure about his background, but effectively they have sort of moved around the ownership. I think Gary Hetherington has 20%, and then the Lockyer Grant Westall consortium has the remaining 80%, and then they've sold part of that to Andrew Gray. So there's some changes at London. They've moved into, I think it's London Irish's training complex. It's where their women and their reserves are going to play. And they've made some hires off the field. So, they're gearing up. I mean, I think the key bit is they don't know what division they're going to be in next year.
And that's a massive thing. I mean, if you think about the conversation we've just had about the south of France, well, those Londoners, you can assume that anybody with xenophobic thoughts is going to have similar thoughts about those, and particularly if those Londoners have some Australians thrown in as well, and depending on how conversations went at Magic Round this weekend will depend one way or the other in terms of it will influence one way or the other where London end up, I would imagine. And I think when you do look at the Super League and you look at the ladder, the way things are panning out right now, there's so much that makes sense when you consider that somebody in Australia looked at the Super League and said we need to bring it back down to 10 teams because of basically the relative strength of everybody from 1 to 8, 9, and then potentially the strength of London when you consider the investment that's taken place as well. So it's such a big thing, John, and there'll be an element of stasis, I think, until Leeds know what Brad Arthur is doing, until London know what the NRL are doing, and so many players and clubs will be in that static mode until such time as they can move forward based on these decisions.
Yeah, I think Steve Mascall wrote a story from quoting Jason Demetriou. So they've had England internationals reach out to them, say they want to join the Broncos, the London Broncos. But the NRL isn't the only way London could go up. Obviously, with the IMG criteria, they could replace a Huddersfield. I don't know how the scores are exactly at the moment, but obviously London are going to go up in performance on the field. They're going to go up in finances. They're going to go up in the fandom area because they've been streaming their games on YouTube and they've had an increase in attendances and social media views and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting few months. With the NRL, who knows what's going to happen there, Leigh? Yeah, who knows? Hopefully we'll have some news in the next few days, but I think there's no certainty that an investment or a partnership is going to be secured. I wouldn't be betting my life on it, put it that way.
Maybe the RFL should hire the Widnes general manager as the new CEO because he's just left Widnes. What's going on at Widnes? Things are changing.
Yes, I believe, a bit of an exclusive, I believe Tim Holmes will be leaving the Widnes Vikings. I think they might
Used to
announce
coach
it.
him.
There you go. It's a small world, rugby league, and I think they're going to announce it this week. Widnes. I have been chasing them for comment, but yeah, there's a few changes off the field. One of the directors, Andy Harabin, or I probably pronounced his name correctly. Apologies. He departed a while ago, and yeah, I think there's some off-field things going on at Widnes. I think there is some speculation they'll be cutting back their spending next season, their player spending. And obviously, look, it's hard times in the championship, isn't it? We've talked a lot about the championship in this podcast. You know, Featherstone, Salford, Halifax, North Wales. You can just go on and on. So the championship this season is a very weird and odd division. Teams don't play each other the same amount of times. Sometimes they don't play for a month. There was a press release out just about the 1895 Cup, the semi-finals, and I think the finals on a Monday night. I don't know if that's a typo in the press release, but I'm sure they said that the final's going to be on the 31st of August on a Monday night. So maybe Monday night footy is back, Leigh. Maybe that's the...
Maybe they'll play it in black and white too. Is the game in a complete state of flux, or what? Is it at a pivotal point? Because wherever you look at the game, be it the Championship, be it the lower echelons of Super League, be it the NRL involvement, and the other one I want to bring in is the England side. I mean, it's such a pivotal year for England as a nation in rugby league. We've had the demise of Wales, Scotland, and Ireland over the last 2 decades, and quite frankly, it looks like England have slipped off a pedestal or two as well. So now they have a new coach in Brian McDermott, who's only been appointed for this tournament, essentially. And already he's probably lost the halfback, George Williams. There's nothing to suggest that he would have picked him. And also a staff member who's been on board for a long time has been moved on too. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's made a lot of changes to the backroom staff. Chris Barron, the head of performance, is gone. He works at Wigan. The analyst there at Wigan, whose name escapes me, he's also left. And there has been reports that Paul Wellens, and I'm trying to think who was the other coach. Was it Sean O'Loughlin? But yeah, basically Brian McDermott's come in. He's kind of wiped the slate clean with the England setup. A lot of those people had been there for 14 years, or at least the Sean Wayne era, if not before that. So he wants a clean slate. Brian McDermott. He did actually say in his first presser that George Williams was going to be his captain. So, my understanding is that George is very, very unlikely to play in the World Cup. He's not had his surgery yet, and it's very major surgery. It could be a 5-6 month recovery. So, that I think that's a blow for England. I think Matty Lees. I can't remember if Matty Lees has been ruled out for the World Cup or not, but obviously he picked up that serious injury against Wigan in the Challenge Cup semi-final last weekend. So England's not, in fairness, and we saw this last year with Matty Ashton and a few others, Victor Radley, England's not strong enough to be able to go into a World Cup or an Ashes missing a couple of top 20 players.
Let's go through the side. David Wright wrote to me on my rugby league coach.
David Wade, is he coaching? David Wade, no. Wadey, bring it back.
David Wright wrote to me on my rugby league coach socials, which is at rugby league coach, by the way, and he said, "This is a question for your 360 podcast. If you were 360 podcast, sorry, if you were the England coach, what would your 17 be for the end of the year?" So I quickly looked at the last team that England put out. So we're going to literally go through it, John. AJ Brimson was the fullback. Is there a fullback better than AJ Brimson that we can put there based on what you've seen?
Not on current form this year, no.
No. The wings were Joe Burgess and Tom Johnston. Joe Burgess will be about 42, won't he, by the time?
It'll be, if you're picking now, mine would be Dom Young and Matty Ashton.
Yeah, well, Dom Young was in the side. I think, did he get injured for that week?
He
or
got
something?
injured.
Yeah.
Yes, he did the last
so
test.
Dom Young, Matty Ashton, Herbie and Harry Newman were the centres. I mean, Herbie, yes. Who else? Because Harry Newman's not been playing much,
Harry
has he?
Newman couldn't get in the Leeds team until this weekend, and has not been playing particularly well. So I'd probably have Jake Wardle in over Harry Newman.
The halves were George Williams and Harry Smith, so I definitely would like Jake Connor based on current form.
And Mikey Lewis.
Okay, Mikey Lewis was on the bench. Props were Mike McKeegan, Matty Lees, and on the bench was Alex Walmsley, Morgan Smithies, and Mikkel Ajeletsky. So I'd say that's 5 middles. I don't know if the modern game and the way it's being refereed in Australia, which you soon will translate to the World Cup, I don't know if you need 3 props, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think Luke Thompson definitely deserves to be in there. I think if you're putting Victor Radley at 13, you'd have Morgan Knowles in there. Obviously, he can play middle. I think Morgan Smithies would definitely be in there. Mike Manikin, I think, did a good job. Probably not being as in form as he was last year, but I still think he's probably a good shout for the 24-man squad. In terms of other props, I think probably Alex Walmsley, no. Aletsky's an interesting one. Yeah, I think... I'm just trying to think who else has been, whether you look at an Ethan Havard or who else is out there. But I think Luke Thompson is the big one who missed the Ashes, who would definitely be in my team anyway.
Jez Litton started at 9, but I'll be honest, from a coaching perspective, he is a real liability in the defensive line early when there is a bit of rugby league for 10 minutes before the game starts going sideways. So what hooker can we have that's a bit more solid defensively for at least the first 15 minutes or so before Jez Litton comes on? Because I would definitely have Jez Litton in that 17. I think on form at the moment, you'd be picking Brad O'Neill as your starting 9 and then bringing Jez Litton on for either the last 30 or the last 20. Back row, Callum Watkins, who, again, I mean, he's not young anymore. Kai Pearce-Paul, I think, would be a lock in the side, and Morgan Knowles was the lock, the loose forward. So what would you do differently there? Junior Nsemba definitely has to be in the 17. I personally, he didn't have a great year last year, but he's a phenomenal athlete, and he's been in outrageously good form this year. And he's a point of difference. You look at the pure size of him, the speed, the strength. He brings an X factor, and I'd have him in my team. So look, in terms of talent, I don't get too excited by what we've just read out, okay? But I also don't think the Australian side is anywhere near as strong as we made it look in England last year. There's so many weaknesses in that side. And I said this when we were doing the Ashes Rugby League podcast, when we did the clips. I got battered for this in my home country where I live right now. And a lot of how we approach things as an English nation is about what kind of pedestal we put our opponents on, and I think there's so many weaknesses there that we can exploit from the Australian perspective. The problem we have now is that in the World Cup we might have to play everybody else but Australia just to get to Australia, and Samoa are going to look strong. Tonga will be strong as well, and I think I am excited in the sense that brand new coach, brand new eyes, but I don't know if Brian McDermott is the coach to do this. They need to play more football. They need to chance their arm. They can't try and go into a grind. He has said that. He said that in his first presser. That's he used the Klitschko Tyson Fury analogy, and you don't stand toe to toe with Klitschko, which is obviously not what Fury did, and Fury beat Klitschko. So yeah, I think he understands that. On the Kangaroos, I think, as you know, Leigh,
it wasn't the strongest Kangaroos team for the Ashes. But the fact that the World Cup's in Australia, and you get this with the Tonga and the Samoan teams that came out to England the last couple of years, it will be a stronger Australian team. You'll get Latrell Mitchell, you'll get Tommy Turbo. There'll be other players who didn't come or decided to have surgery, and they'll put that off because it's a home World Cup. So I think the Kangaroo team will be a better team come October than what we saw last October.
Absolutely. And New Zealand, who were fantastic last.
Yes. Well, New Zealand, if you look at some of their players who are in form, Dylan Brown, for example, Callum Ponga is going to play for New Zealand, isn't he? So, that's a big win for them. I think the Kiwis will be strong. Tonga will be. You look at Kola and Olakau'atu, just two of their players. Adam Fanua-Blake. I think Tonga, and then Samoa. They're probably going to have a few more, aren't they? Isn't Tino likely to defect? Obviously, the Hammer. I'm really looking forward to the World Cup. Obviously, flying down there and going to a few games. But yeah, it isn't going to be easy for England. I don't think anyone should have any illusions that it is.
It's a real pivotal year for them in that regard. I mean, last year was pivotal, and every year that they don't do something is going to, it's going to have that P word attached to it.
That's the point I was going to make when you said about being pivotal and crossroads. I don't really want to say that because I probably say it too regularly and nothing happens, but you do eventually come to think there will be a breaking point at some point, or maybe there's just lots of little breaking points and not a big one. But I don't disagree with your sentiment.
Rich Earlybird wrote us a message which is linked to this too, which was about academy teams. So he said, I believe all Super League teams should have an academy. If the lads in the academy don't have a match, then they should be able to play for their community club. 16 to 19-year-olds will only develop by playing. Too many academy lads play too few games. The licensing of a handful of academies is making the player pool smaller. I'd be keen to know Leigh's opinion on this. For instance, York have no sides officially outside of first team. This cannot be the case from 2027. Lads in Hullett academies are playing just a handful of games. It can't be good for development. So I will answer that, John. Rich, 100%. Look, England aren't as good at rugby league as Australia. And Australia's offshoots, such as Samoa and Tonga, and New Zealand. The only way they're going to get better at rugby league is by playing more rugby league. So, Rich, you're absolutely right. Now, I don't know the details of why some academies exist and why some academies don't exist. And John will be able to furnish us with some of that, I'm sure, soon. But when I look at all the problems that exist in English Rugby League right now, a lot of them are caused by not having much money. One of the cheapest ways to get better rugby league teams is to develop your own. And in theory, in some sports, you can make money because they get sold to others. We don't have that system in rugby league, but occasionally there is compensation if contracts are broken. So there needs to be, again, I mean, we keep talking about pivotal moments and crucial points in rugby league's world in England. This is another one. What do we want to do with our juniors? What's the goal? What we're trying to achieve?
Was that to me, Leigh?
Well, it wasn't to anybody else in the room, yeah.
Well, look, I think ideally what the goal should be is to win a World Cup, to win an Ashes. But to answer this in a roundabout way, I disagree a little bit slightly because the academy is very controversial, but I think the fact is, and the RFL tried to change this a while ago when they didn't, if I remember correctly, it was Salford, Cass, might have been Hull KR as well. They didn't give the licenses. There was a big outcry, and then they backpedaled and said, yeah, you can have a license. But the problem is the player pool at the amateur level and the participation is not there. Now, we all know participation has dropped off massively. The overall figures are being, what's the word?
Manipulated.
Yeah, well, they're made to look better because there's a lot more girls playing rugby league, which is great. But in terms of boys, the drop off, particularly I think around 13, 14, 15, is massive. And a lot of clubs, amateur clubs, have actually gone. Now, you can talk about York and you say, well, how many amateur clubs are in the York area? There's not many. I think there's maybe half a dozen. I don't know exactly the numbers. I know in an area like Hull, a lot of the amateur clubs have gone, and that's one of the reasons why Hull and FC and KR had a joint academy for a while. So we actually need to go a step below the academy and actually try and get just kids playing generally, which increases the player pool so there actually are more talented kids getting into that academy stage. But I would agree with Rich in the sense of they don't play enough games and the reserves don't. So this is where the feeder system, when it comes to the championship clubs, this is where that needs to happen. So if you're, use the example, what's a good example? York and Newcastle, we'll use that one because effectively they are. If you're in that York squad or you're a young player and you're not playing Super League, you go out and play Championship at Newcastle because that's a much better standard, tougher environment than reserves football. And the gap, there isn't really a great stepping stone from under-19s academy football into Super League, into first team. So that's kind of another gap that we've not really bridged. But we don't have enough players to go around. This is
right.
the thing.
So to that point, that was the first thing you went to. You said not all can have academies because there's not enough community clubs, not enough players. One of the key. Yeah, I know. I didn't say it wasn't, John. What I'm saying is, though, participation improves if there's a pathway.
Yes.
So it's chicken and egg. Okay.
It is. That's true.
So kids that are talented at sport will literally decide at a certain age, 13, 14, 15, which direction to go in. So if you happen to be good at rugby league, happen to be good at rugby union, happen to be good at soccer, and happen to be good at cricket, which many people are because they're good at sport.
Yeah.
In terms of pathway, there's a clear fourth out of all those.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Okay.
100%.
So there's a chicken and an egg element. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've heard the phrase build it and they will come. They're all linked. So participation is not exclusive from performance in terms of the bigger pool you have in participation, the more chance more cream will come to the top. But it also goes the other way too. Those people who are participating need somewhere to go or else they'll just drift off. So it's all part of the same thing. So he's not wrong, but there are reasons that it's happened because all you did was list the reasons of why it's happened. But they're all, if you have a look back, so whoever the new CEO is and whoever takes over the game or doesn't take over the game need to look at the whole thing because they're absolutely linked. It's participation and performance are literally part of they're almost two cheeks of the same backside because everyone starts as a participant and they eventually become a performer or don't become a performer. So it's everywhere you look, there's an issue, John.
And the other element to that, I just add, is visibility, isn't it, Leigh? Because you're right, everyone starts as a participant, but most people start as a participant because they're inspired or they see player on TV or they read about it in the paper or their dad that takes them to a game and they see, for me, it was, I don't know, Cliffy Lyons. I'm trying to think other players in the late 80s, early 90s. It was you go out, and I think that a lot of the modern generation, it might have been Benji Marshall. They saw him playing, and you want to go out and try and be Benji Marshall or Sean Johnson or whoever. Kalen Ponga probably now, Reece Walsh now. But the fact in England is the players aren't big stars. They're not seen everywhere. They're not read about. They're kind of operating in a bubble. And unless you're in the rugby league bubble, you're not really that inspired, are you? So that's a big problem. The top level, And I know this back when I was a kid. Michael Jordan was the biggest star in the world, and I used to play basketball. Everyone wanted to be like Michael Jordan. The whole Gatorade campaign, like Mike. I'd like to be like Mike.
Yeah.
So you got to be seen and you got to be out there, and that's why people want to go and play football, because the footballers, the Premier League players, are stars, and they also get paid a shit ton of money.
When I was a kid, first of all, I thought I wanted to be goalkeeper for Manchester City in England, and I played soccer for a few years, and then all of a sudden, by accident, by actions of the universe, I ended up playing some rugby league. And one of the things that made me decide I'm going to play rugby league rather than football, soccer, was our schoolboy final. So when we played all the schools in Salford, our final was played at the Willows. And I looked at the soccer I played, the football, and I'd played in the finals in that too. They weren't played at Main Road or Old Trafford. And I thought, I know which sport I'm going to get more reward out of.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean about the reward and the pathway. And that's literally what determined or basically swung it that way, put it that way. And the other thing was, I was better at rugby league than I was in goal. So
I always hope.
Yeah. So review of games from last round. Bradford today, where you are, beat Hull FC 16-14. Bradford's tries came from Blake, Ryan, and 4 goals from Atkin. Hull FC scored with Batchelor, the other Lytton, and 3 goals from Hardacre. So Bradford hadn't won for 5 matches. Hull FC were down to 12, and there were no tries in the first 40 minutes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, look, it wasn't a great game. There was some real basic... It felt at one point people couldn't catch a pass. There were some real basic errors, and it was, in terms of the touch footy you were talking about earlier, it was the antidote to that, because it was a bit of a slugfest. It was very defensive orientated, but there was a few moments of brilliance. Ethan Ryan's try in the corner was sensational, and Hull FC came back and almost snuck it with 12 men. But yeah, Yusuf Aiden basically red missed, got red carded. That was a brain explosion from him, and Hull FC went down accordingly. So yeah, an important win for Bradford, but it was not a high quality game, shall we say.
Did the crowd react accordingly? Was it a big crowd? Was it?
I didn't see the number. It looked a decent crowd at Oddsall. The sun was out, which always helps. Yeah, it was obviously the only Sunday game. But yeah, for Bradford, I think, as you said, they hadn't won for a while. Important 2 points, and they showed a lot of fight and a lot of ticker, Bradford. So credit to them for that. They did grind out the result. But when they had 20 or 15 minutes, however it was, with an extra man, you really, you back them to get the win there with, an extra man for such a long period.
Hull KR scored 20 at Leigh. Leigh only returned with 16 points. Bit of a comeback in the second half for Leigh. Tries to Alec Laenke, Charnley and Hughes for Leigh. Goals 2 for Cook. Tries to Hull KR from Hiku, Davis and Morg, and 4 goals from Martin. It says, I've got some words here from the BBC website, incredible second half comeback, and then I've looked at the scores and I'm thinking it was only 12 points. Bloody hell.
Yeah, it was an exciting end. Leigh were 20-6 down, and fought back and almost stole it at the end. Adam Cook with the knock on, which very late on proved influential. But I think a bit of stupidity from Micah Lewis. Got sin-binned right on half time for basically laying all over in the tackle, trying to slow down the opposition. And I think he had another trip as well. So I think Micah Lewis, he really needs to get that stuff out of his game. I think it proved quite costly for Hull KR. Didn't cost them the 2 points in the end, but I think it showed that Leigh are starting to hit some form and come back strong, I think they are a good chance to make the 6. I think you named what the table was earlier, and I think they're sitting 7th. I don't really see anyone else apart from the 6 chasing that. I don't think Catalans, unless there's a massive turnaround there. But I think Leigh are, showing their worth, even though they didn't get the win.
Nicola Frodsham wrote to us and said, how does Mikey Lewis get away with tripping? It's happened a couple of times now and nothing has been done. Nicola, if the Rugby Football League knew rugby league and knew how to run a game, they would be writing to Hull KR if there's a pattern and saying, we are aware that one of your players regularly trips and giving them some laws in which they need to refer to next time he gets excited and trips someone. It's pretty simple if you ask me. So, and again, it comes down to focus and maybe resource as well, but care. I mean, Mikey Lewis, look, there are so many limitations in his game, actually, and this is one of them. And I'd expect better from somebody that we're thinking of being one of the halves in the England side. I'd expect an awful lot better, quite frankly. Toulouse actually had a better comeback than Hull KR. They were 18-0 down at half-time, but the game ended Toulouse 16, Warrington 24. Tries for Toulouse were Jussom. Ashel Bolt scored 2. He scores every week, him. Good on him. And Rouge kicked 2. Warrington, they're 24. 2 came from Kings, 1 from Smith, 1 from Wood, and 4 goals from Sneyd. What was this game like, John?
Yeah, it was similar. Warrington going 18-0 up, 24-0 up, and then you think the game's over. And then Toulouse come roaring back. They've done it a few times this season. Seen it come alive when the game's effectively over. And Mark Sneyd got sin binned, which obviously played in their hands, but they left themselves too much to do and didn't get the win. And I think for Warrington, after the disappointing Challenge Cup semi-final exit, important for them to bounce back with the 2 points.
What happens when players are knackered because they're playing too much and not fully conditioned or as they should be? What happens is they start to pick and choose what they do within games and within rounds in the competition. And basically what a lot of that can be put down to is teams like Warrington and others will go to Toulouse or play against Toulouse, go off red hot start, easily get over the top of them, and then they'll just ease off the gas subconsciously because they want to save a bit of energy. Toulouse will realise they probably deserve to be on this field against the likes of Warrington, and they come back at them. And because our game is a physical sport, a lot of it comes down to players' moods and mentality. And if you are 1 or 2% off, then things can switch quite considerably. That said, I mean, we talked about Catalan's woes, we talked about Huddersfield's woes. Toulouse aren't far off that either, are they really now?
No, I don't think so. Look, I think they need more squad depth. Toulouse, they need more players who've played in Super League regularly and are experienced the division. But I think they are a well coached side, and they're definitely competing. There's definitely effort there, and just quite often it's not enough.
Wigan 24, Leeds 4. The manner of the victory, the size of the victory was a bit of a shock, actually. Tries to Wigan, who were 16-0 up at half-time from Farriman. Kieran, he scores every week too, the lad, good on him. Hodkinson and Wardle, and 4 goals from Kieran. Is he still flying out the line and killing people, John? And Leeds' only try came from Sevo, surprise, surprise. Tell us about that game, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Wakefield, which was on at the same time, so I've only seen a bit of the replay, a bit of the highlights, but fantastic Wigan performance. Went up 16-0, really, strong defensively. I think the highlight for me was Jack Farriman's hit on Mike Acevo. All of 75 kgs of Jack Farriman, and I think Acevo's about 110. But
Sevo opened his body up. When you do that, if you open your body up and try and get past someone and you're not quick enough to get past them. And Farriman came in at exactly the right time. I saw that on Instagram, and yeah, it was good.
But no, I think it's just, Wigan, they seem to have really turned a corner. Obviously, the last fortnight, they're very motivated, they're pumped up. They've got a good blend of players, and Leeds, disappointing for them. I know they did have a try disallowed, which was probably a little bit harsh, but a bit of a lesson. I thought this was a really good chance for Leeds to, they've beaten Warrington, they've beaten St Helens, they've beaten flogged Holcar in Las Vegas. Wigan was probably the last challenge to, show their title credentials, but it was a bit of it was a disappointing evening for them. So full credit to the Warriors.
York 18, Castleford 24. York will be upset with this because they were 18-12 ahead at half time. Tries to them from Viniyayawa. How do you say that, John?
I can't say it now.
Viniyayawa.
The king.
He'll do. Wood, Galliano, and 3 goals from Hunter. Castleford tries from Hurst. Karake, how do I say that? Anatoni and Grecian.
Renuf Atoni.
No, the Karake. Oh, that's Gary, isn't it? Gary.
Yes.
Right.
Gary.
And Grecian, Greacen. What's his name?
He's Fijian. Gary.
No, I know that. What about Grecian?
I'm not sure.
Did I say that, mate? Right, mate. Everyone deserves the dignity of their own name.
I can't read. I can't see what you're reading. So
just try listening to it. Weaver kicked 4 goals. Topsy turvy game by the look of this, and apparently it was the first ever Super League game between the two clubs.
Yes, very tight game. I'd say defence was on top. York had 18-12 at half time, and Cass just came out a really strong second half. We did have a man Simbin for a high shot, but 2 crash over tries late for Cass. Just basically crash balls, bang over the line, and they closed out the game really well. Cass, I thought, just their line speed, they kicked deep, they tackled hard, they really frustrated York, who just couldn't open them up at the end. And I think Dejanazzi was very good in the halves for the Tigers. So, a very influential 2 points for Cass. Obviously, wins have been rare in this season.
Catalans fell off a cliff in the second half. It was 10-all at half time. Wakefield scored 58. So 48 of them came in the second half. Tries to Hamlin, ULA, Tate scored 2, Fartilli scored a hat-trick. It was a prop scoring a hat-trick in 17 minutes.
Off the bench. Yeah.
Pitt scored 1, Myers scored 1, Tavanga, Pratt, and Truman, 7 goals from Lino. So that was 58 for them. Catalans scored 10 and tries from Staines and Sexton, and Sexton kicked the goals. Go on. We've talked a lot about Catalans overall, but what did you see in this game?
It was bizarre. I'll be honest with you, Leigh. This is the first time I've been at Wakey this season, and it's a great stadium now, great atmosphere. 8,500. You're right there. You just playing a bit.
Yeah, of music. I just clicked on a rugby league thing, and they had music. I didn't think it'd have music.
But Wakefield started poorly. They were 10-0 down. Fatape was just running over people, and you thought, okay, this is going to be a tough night for the Trinity. And then they clawed back 2 tries. It was 10-10 at half time, so delicately poised. And then Catalans just went to. They just imploded. It was utterly bizarre. Just a remarkable game. Wakefield played some lovely, lovely stuff in the second half, don't get me wrong, but it was just try. I think 9 tries in 40 minutes. As I said, Fertilli came off the bench and scored a hat-trick. I can't remember a prop ever scoring a hat-trick, and I think it was in 17 minutes.
There's quite obviously a fitness issue there at Catalan, because there's a few games where they've fallen off that same cliff in the second half.
Well, I've written about it in that opinion piece that I've published today. Ryan Sheridan he called it embarrassing. He was basically scathing saying we need players. We've got players who aren't up to scratch here. We don't have the depth, etc., etc. Now, I think there are real issues at the Dragons, which I wrote about. But yeah, it was very, very poor. I mean, 48 points in 40 minutes to concede that defensively. If you talk about touch footy, I mean, there's your touch footy. It was very weak. They effectively waved the white flag, Catland. So, yeah, they're in crisis, I would say.
In a similar thing to what I just said about Toulouse, Huddersfield were 24-0 down to Huddersfield at half-time. The game ended Huddersfield 18, St Helens 26. Huddersfield's tries came from O'Donnell, Swift and Evalds. 3 goals to Russell. St Helens 26 came from Robinson, Murphy, Dagnall, Delaney, and 5 goals to Hastings. So, I think there's a pattern. The bigger teams are racking up the points and then just taking the cue off the rack, quite frankly. I've seen it 1,000 times before. Looking at those results, that's what's happening too.
Yeah, I mean, that was a poor game on Thursday night. I mean, that was one of those games where you're kind of like, oh, I hope this isn't being televised because people won't want to watch it. And I know there was people commenting on my Facebook that they'd turn it off and watch the darts. Now, I think darts is completely boring, so I don't know why anyone would want to watch the darts.
Well, we didn't do after the Hooter last week because of my business, but one of the reasons was I looked at the fixtures and I thought, I don't fancy that at all.
Well, it was. Look. I was at home watching the Huddersfield game, and Huddersfield were dreadful in the first half. St Helens were good, but then they were quite poor in the second half. Huddersfield came back, but we had the video referee taking ages. We had captain's challenges. You had no fans in the stadium. It was just a poor contest. I mean, yeah, there's been the common denominator. Sadly, this season is the Giants. They've been involved in a lot of poor contests, and yeah, that was a tough watch.
We've got 2 questions that I think we've covered ad nauseum on this podcast, so I'll just brush over them, but I want to respect the guys who sent them through so they know that we're listening. Alan Redmond's asked, what's the views on respective performances of the 3 promoted clubs? Alan, me and John have spoken significantly about that. It's just going to get worse and worse. Bradford will get some wins because they play on a field that's smaller than any other in the competition, and there's a bit of atmosphere and momentum there because it's Bradford Bulls. But they've been heading south for the last few weeks and managed to scrape a win against Hull FC, and the other 2 teams being propped up by Huddersfield. Kevin Citrus Clark said, will the RFL or Super League ever scrap the captain's challenge for the sake of those watching at home or in the ground? It is dreadful. Kevin, we've mentioned that several times, myself and John. And I don't think they'll scrap it, but they definitely need to cut down on the times. Anything you want to add to those 2 things, John?
No, I mean, I don't know whether they'll scrap it or not, but it certainly is dreadful. And yeah, I mean, on the promoted teams, look, I think Bradford obviously have the full investment, while the other 2 teams don't. So I think that's important to note. And obviously Toulouse have to pay the £1 million, which we've also talked about. But I think under the circumstances, considering they only had, October or whatever it was, September to get ready, I think they're doing all right. Like they're trying hard, and I think they're 3 good coaches. But I do also think at the end of the season, those 3 clubs will be in the bottom 6. I don't think that we will see, a remarkable shift. I may be wrong, and they may not finish bottom. A Huddersfield may save them, or a Cass or a Hull FC. But yeah, I think my sympathy is with those teams because I think any team that goes up, you need time and you need the equal amount of money and conditions to be able to compete.
It's not a level playing field, is it?
No, I mean, the thing is, we all know that, Leigh. Like, it's not, I'm not saying anything revolutionary there. That's just obvious. So, yeah, look, I think there isn't, I've said this many times before, I'll say it again, and, maybe we'll have 15 teams next year, but we don't have the player quality to go around. And there's a lot of New South Wales and Queensland Cup players and other players who probably shouldn't be on full-time contracts, but they are at the moment, and they're given their all. But we can see what's being dished out there every week.
NRL news, like I said, I was at Magic Round Friday, mate. The Canterbury Bulldogs are absolutely gone. They, I mentioned earlier that rugby league's a physical game, so if people are happy, they tend to play with everything they've got. I think it's it's a very underrated thing in rugby league. If you're happy with your coach, you're happy with the team, you're happy with the mood in the camp, etc., etc., you give it everything you've got.
Yeah.
If you're not, subconsciously, you just become a little bit weaker, and that's clear with the Bulldogs. They're trying hard, but it's literally not working, and I think their confidence is absolutely shot. The other interesting thing is West Tigers have not won. In fact, they've done the exact opposite since Jerome Luai announced that he was going to Papua New Guinea, and I think anybody who's ignoring that is in denial. Yes, there's injuries, but there's injuries at every NRL club. And obviously, we're talking about Toulouse, we're talking about York, and we're talking about Bradford and the not even playing field. Perth Bears, because Papua New Guinea are offering tax-free incentive, Perth Bears is probably a longer flight for so many people in Australia to go to Perth. So on the Sydney and Brisbane side of Australia, it's probably a little bit longer to get to Perth than it is to get to Papua New Guinea from Brisbane, actually, I think.
No, I think you're right. It's only...
Or equidistant, at least.
Yeah, I think it is closer to Brisbane. I know it's only a 45-minute flight from Cairns, PNG. Obviously, to Perth, you're looking at about 5 hours from Sydney. So I think from Brisbane, it's probably Port Moresby's probably a couple of hours, but under 5. But yeah, you look at the teams you look at the team that Perth's assembled, and you look at what PNG have signed already, and who they're obviously Connor Watson's over there having a look, isn't it? I mean, Connor Watson's played Origin. He'd be a big signing for Perth, but that's not going to happen. It looks like Cam McInnes isn't going there. I mean, I don't think Brady Croft would have been a big signing for Perth, but he would have been, in the mix for the halves. If you're looking at odds for next season, Perth Bears would be massive. The favourites for the spoon, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, and there's also rumours that all is not well on the staff side of things.
Yes, I have heard that myself.
Mal Meninga's very close associate has left the job of general manager of football. There's stories surrounding the relationship between Ben Gardner, the assistant coach, and Mal Meninga. There is a rumour that Ben Gardner might be the next Hull KR coach swirling around. So,
but the thing, I've not heard that. But I mean, I think the point with Ben Gardner is that he's seen as being the Perth coach in the season 3, isn't it? Like a Christian Wolf, Wayne Bennett, Dolphins, Mal Meninga. But I don't think Mal thinks that he'll be handing over the reins. And what's really interesting, Leigh, is that Mal Meninga's living at Canberra at the moment, and Ben Gardner's living at Sydney. And I didn't realise until only recently. I thought he was still on the staff at Penrith, but he's not. Why are they both not living in Perth now? Setting up the club and doing media, and you know what I mean. Like it's just it looks like they're gonna their pre-season starts in 4 months, 5 months. They need to pull their finger out, Perth. The Matty Lees is obviously a player they've been linked to recently, and this was put to me by someone, and I think it's spot on. Like Perth needs to be, and they've already signed quite a few, but they need to be looking at England for players. They need to be getting an English hub, because I think it's something like a quarter of the people who live in Perth are British, as in were born in Britain. They've got a massive expat community. It's an isolated city, Perth, in terms of the east coast of Australia. So why would you not build, a bit of a hub for the best English players? Build that around that could be your identity. The Perth British Bears, or the British Bulldogs, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, they are struggling, Perth, and I'd like to see them do well. Even though being a Manly fan and they've got the North Sydney connection, I'd actually like to see them do all right. I mean, obviously lose to Manly, but you don't want them to come into the competition and get flogged every week. I don't think that will help the sport or the competition. So
let's look at the tips for next week's Super League. I've just gone on the Super League website to get the draw, and it flashed up not secure, a big hazard signing. It says your connection isn't private. Attackers might be trying to steal your information from superleague.co.uk. For example, passwords, messages, or credit cards. I've got the option of going back, or I've got the advanced options. What should I click on, John?
I think that's all those dodgy sites you look at through the week. I think that's the problem. All the viruses.
I've got high security on this website. Anyway, I've clicked on this browser. I've clicked on hide advanced, and this server couldn't prove that it's superleague.co.uk. Its security certificate is from admin.superleague.co.uk. This may be caused by a misconfiguration or an attacker intercepting your connection. Can you imagine how many people they're losing out to with this popping up?
Well, I know Thursday night it's Hull KR and Wigan, so I'll give you that.
I do have an option, John. Don't fret, to continue to superleague.co.uk, but in brackets, it's unsafe. I'm going to take the risk. Okay?
All right.
This is like turning on your car when there's a risk of a car bomb.
It's not the RA. Just give us give us the list, the fixture list.
I'm in. Right, match week. We're up to 12, aren't we? They call it. Hull KR and Wigan on Thursday. That'll be a good game. Are you going?
Will it be a good game, Leigh? Because it's a week out from the Challenge Cup where there's two teams play. Oh. So yeah, exactly. It's another one of those. I don't use any French, but I fucking hate it when you literally have the two teams. And Wigan and Warrington had this 2 years ago. They played the week before the Challenge Cup final. I mean, one of them probably both of them will rest players. Who knows who they'll play over the rest? But it just takes the sting out of the contest. So
I do think every year what the RFL should do is go, right, there's probably going to be 4 teams in the Challenge Cup. Probably. 2 or 4 teams, maybe 5. Let's keep them apart this round and the round after.
I don't think the forward planning is the strength of the RFL and Super League.
So should we not bother tipping that game?
Look, I think it's really hard to know in terms of what teams they put out, but
yeah.
Considering it's at home, I'll go with a close Hull KR win.
On Friday, Leigh Leopards play Hull FC and Leeds Rhinos play Huddersfield Giants. Leigh and Leeds will win them.
Yeah, I think I was at the last Leeds and Huddersfield game, and Leeds scored 50 odd. I think Leeds will win that one. And if you look at Leigh were a little bit unlucky on the weekend, but played reasonably well, and Hull FC were not great. So, yeah, looking at recent form, I will back the Leopards.
3 o'clock on Saturday, Castleford host Saints. That's an interesting kick-off time for a Castleford home game.
It is. I'm not sure about that one.
Toulouse, are you going to give a tip, by the way? Sorry?
Yeah, I think, look, kudos to Cass, but I think St Helens, they've shown a knack for getting results this season. They've been relatively consistent, so I'll pick them for that one.
It won't clash with any soccer, by the way. It might clash with a playoff final or something, but
there is a playoff. Yeah, there's the championship playoff finals on the same time.
Toulouse and Wakefield play at 7 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah, the way Wakefield played on Friday night, I can't look past them. They've just got a lot of attacking weapons. Jake Truman's having a massive season, and they've got a very big and mobile forward pack that's bashing teams at the moment.
And York Knights host the Catalan Dragons. I'd fancy York to get another win there, actually.
Yeah, to be honest, back at York, I think they're starting to get a few players back from injury, York, and I think it's a very winnable game for them. So I think the Knights.
On that Saturday, Hull City play Southampton at 4:30, so Cass should be pretty confident. I don't know how many Hull fans live in Castleford, so it's probably going to be all right.
I know one.
Right. Do you think any of them will be at Celtic and Dunfermline in the Scottish Cup final at 3:00 on Saturday? Jeez, that was better. I watched. Oh, mate, let's do a podcast one day on the corruption in Scottish football, and then on Sunday at 3:00, Warrington host Bradford. I can only see one winner there, I think.
Yeah, look, I think Bradford will go there and give it a good shake, but I think Warrington at home. Yeah, I think they'll get the win.
All right, all good. Look, in terms of after the Hooter guys, I'm really busy with something that will hopefully come to an end this week. So I'll talk with John. If we don't have one this week, don't worry, it will come back. But me and John will discuss. Where can people get you, John, in the interim?
They can get me on Patreon at rugbyleaguehub.com long reads. They can get me on Instagram at Johnny D. Davidson RL and on X and on Facebook as well.
I'm rugbyleaguecoach.com.au, admin at rugbyleaguecoach.com.au is the email, and at rugbyleaguecoach on socials. Please hit me up on Facebook or Instagram with a message. On X, I am at RL Coach on the net because I couldn't get Rugby League Coach. We'll see you when we see you. Take care.